Hello and welcome back to for the very first time to the channel. I am Will, and today I'm going to be talking about sequels I need to read or series I need to continue, because these are ones that somehow I've just left for a little while and I really need to carry on with. And so yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. You would have read it in the title, you will know kind of exactly what that means. And so I'm going to talk about series that I really want to continue with but somehow have left them for a little while. And so let's kick it right off with Bernard Cornwell's The Saxon Stories. I've read 12 installments of this series and I've only got one to go, and I've somehow left it a year. Maybe it's part of me just not wanting to leave these characters behind, and yeah, it's a bit of denial that I won't have anything else with Uhtred of Bebbanburg, but I really need to face up to it and read this conclusion, which Papa Gwyn and my brother Ed over in the Brothers Gwyn also, they both read it and they both say it's a brilliant, satisfying conclusion to this series. And so that's always a worry when it's one of your favourite series, especially a long series like this that you spend so much time with the characters and the cast and the world. That is always worrying that, is it going to end well? Because endings really sum up so much of how you feel about a series, and they have such power over kind of the emotions when you think back on them and the desire to reread a series as well. I think if there's not a great ending, I don't really feel the need to reread a series as much, because you know it's going to end in a bit of a slump. But I've heard that Warlord is different. I've heard that is great, and I just can't read it yet, but I really need to, and I hope that I do pick it up soon. Uhtred of Bebbanburg, historical fiction set with the Saxons. Can it get much better? Especially when Bernard Cornwell's writing it as well. And then next up I have the Wolf Den Trilogy, and so I read the Wolf Den last year, absolutely adored it. I believe it was actually my first review on this channel, and so yeah, a bit of sentimentality there as well. And this is one of the greatest books I have ever read. So this is about a woman, Amara, who is taken as a slave and forced to work in a brothel in Pompeii in the early 1st century. Let me see if it says the exact date. I can't see it, so I can't say, but yeah, it's early 1st century, I believe. And so I'm really going to get caught up in that date now, aren't I? But yeah, can't see it, but I'm sure that if you're really interested, you'll be able to find out. But anyway, it was brilliantly written. The characters were so vivid, the incredible cast. There are great antagonists, great protagonists, and Elodie Harper's prose style I thought it was perfectly suited, and she's obviously adapted it to kind of suit the fluctuation of tone and atmosphere throughout this book. She's a masterful writer, and yeah, when I loved a book this much, how can I not read book 2? I've left it over a year, and so my original plan was leave reading book 2 a little while, so then you don't have to wait too long for book 3, which does come out this November, so I don't have too long. But then I've left it over a year, so I will be reading The House of the Golden Door, which is book 2, very soon, and then I'll be diving straight into book 3. But yeah, I don't know how I've not carried on with this series yet. It is absolutely incredible, and one that I recommend to everyone, even if you don't really dip into the historical fiction genre. I really highly recommend it. And it's not military historical fiction, which is most of the historical fiction I read, so it is really very different to what I usually read, but it has left a mark on me. And I got my brother Ed to read it as well, and he absolutely adored it, and he said book 2 was even better, and so I'm sure great things to come with those reading experiences there. And then some more historical fiction. This is Waful by Hilary Mantel. I adored book 1. It is a masterpiece, and it's known for a masterpiece for a reason. Thomas Cromwell is amongst probably the top 10 character crafts I've ever had the pleasure of following across the page. His depth of character, how you really see kind of he is haunted by his past, and how that comes through without him explicitly confronting it. It feels so real in that sense that it's not explicit, it's very natural and organic, and it's a lot about reading into the character and the themes, and you spend so much time with these characters. And it's one that I couldn't blitz read, so I read it in kind of 20-30 page snippets, and that I think actually really enhanced the reading experience, because it gave me more time to mull over what was going on, and as I said, make those links to kind of his childhood and the events and trauma that he's been through, and his fears as well, and knowing that he has reached the top of society at a time where it was so difficult to kind of go across those borders of the social classes, which were so rigid, that he knows if he slips up once then he is doomed. And so he's got that pressure just mounting up and up, and the stress is not going away. And it was just brilliant build of tension throughout this book as well. And Hilary Mantel, fantastic first book here, and I really cannot wait to read the rest of the series. And I've read it over 2 years ago now, so I'll need to refresh myself about kind of the synopsis of book 1 before I move on to book 2. But yeah, I really need to carry on with the series at some point soon. And then I have the Cicero Trilogy by Robert Harris. I've read the first 2 books as part of a read-along over on the Library of Alexandria's channel earlier this year. And then I haven't read book 3, which I believe is called Dictator. I loved the first 2 books. It was political, historical fiction. Cicero, of course, an incredibly influential and famous figure of the Roman period, just before Caesar became prominent, or whilst he was becoming prominent as well, and so they existed at the same time. And through these books you see the influence they had on each other. And so yeah, it's really captivating and engaging read that was really tense throughout. You really feel kind of the tension of the ramifications and consequences of the events that are unfolding. So whilst we're in the political heart, it's not so much military. You can feel the kind of the echoes of power and how the ripple effect will change the Roman Empire. And obviously we know how huge the Roman Empire was and what an influence it had for centuries. And so yeah, it's really interesting reading this. And Robert Harris, brilliant writer. I really loved his prose style. I loved how it was quite stripped back but really efficient, really immersed me in the world. And yeah, it just felt like it was really researched, and yeah, as I said, immersed me in kind of the antique Roman world. And so yeah, I loved it, and I can't believe I've not read book 3 yet. And then next up, I have read Rising by Pierce Brown. I've only read the first 3 books. I'm currently doing a reread. I just finished Golden Sun, and so I'll be rereading Morning Star, book 3 of the original trilogy very soon. But this time I will be powering on beyond. I won't just stop at them 3. I will continue. And I believe Iron Gold is book 4. And so my brother Ed recently read it and said he thought it was a little bit of a dip. But I've had quite a lot of people think that, maybe because it's quite different to the structure and format of the original trilogy. But then Dark Age, I believe, is book 5, and a lot of people say that is where they really love the series again. And so I won't just stop at Iron Gold. Even if I hate it, I will push on, because this original trilogy, I adore it, and reading it again, it's even better than the first time round. I love how Pierce Brown kind of leaves breadcrumbs throughout, and it felt so planned, and it felt, I mean, he might just be fooling us. He might have been such a good writer that he managed to just kind of think of a plan for book 3 and convince us that he had it thought out from the beginning. But it doesn't matter either way, because that's how it feels, and it feels authentic and real. And these characters, the twists and turns, it feels organic. It's not just doing it for the sake of it. And Pierce Brown, love this series, and it is huge for a reason. And yes, I really need to continue with that. And then next up, I have some indie published, some self-published work, and this is the Three Kingdoms Chronicles. I've read book 1, which I've done a review of on the channel. I've read book 2, adored them both, and I'm looking forward to reading Dynasty of Killers, which was released very recently, I believe just over a month ago. And yeah, I really need to read it. I just love this period of history, looking at the War of the Three Kingdoms in China. And yeah, I need to read more. I love the character work. I love our main character. I love the chronicler's framework that we've got of an old man telling the story of his past to someone else. And I love how the different kind of the Easter eggs to little bits of history that I know. I don't know much about the historical period, but I know a bit about the characters. And so the little Easter eggs are just amazing to pick up on, but it's not a necessity. You can read this without knowing anything about the historical period at all. And I love the training aspects as well. And the character growth is just done absolutely brilliantly. It feels like these characters really... He does feel young at the beginning, and it feels like he actually is aging, which is very hard to do in a book, because young characters can often be way too infuriating to follow. But Baptiste Pinson-Wu manages to avoid that and still make it really engaging. And now our central figure is reaching the age where he can have an influence on the events around him, and that is adding a whole new dynamic, not only with how he perceives himself and in retrospect how he's looking at these events, but also his relationship with all the characters around him. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that growth goes in this series. And then what do I have next up? I have Cradle by Will White. I've been reading 1 installment a month, so I've read 8, and I believe there's 12, so I'll be finished by the end of the year. It's my only reading goal that I've kept to this year, is reading 1 installment of Cradle a month. And so yeah, that's another series I'll be powering on with and hopefully finishing in 2023. And then next up, I'm going to lift up the whole thing here, which is pretty hefty, but I need to carry on with A Song of Ice and Fire. So I've read A Game of Thrones, I've read A Clash of Kings, and I've read A Storm of Swords, but I need to next read A Feast for Crows. I've adored this series. I know that people say that it's kind of tainted because of how the program series ends, and also that the books aren't finished, but I think I totally understand how people think that, especially when they were reading these books as they were coming out and watching the programs as they're coming out. But I think as I'm a bit younger and I kind of known that as I've gone into this, I've not had the expectations of reaching the finale of these arcs or enjoying the end of the series, which I've not actually finished yet. And so I think going with that, knowing that and not expecting those really these kind of high expectations to continue, then I think that makes it still an incredibly enjoyable journey. And yeah, it's one of the reasons I think Game of Thrones is still worth the read if you've not picked it up before. I've absolutely adored it. And obviously a few things were spoiled because it's such a famous and well-known series, but there's still so much depth to this world that there are many things that still took me by surprise. And just the journey on its own, even if I knew everything that was going to happen in it, the journey on its own is just worth it. George R. R. Martin, master of his craft, and the characters are absolutely incredible. I don't know how he manages to have 50, 60 characters that are so unique and have their own idiosyncrasies, and that you know who they are just by a line of dialogue. It really is masterful, and he is one of the best writers that I've come across. And so, yeah, there we go. They are quite a few series. I think maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10, I don't know. Probably 8, I think. I didn't actually count beforehand. But yeah, they are a few series that I need to power on with. I need to continue, and I feel a burning desire to forge on with as well. So please let me know in the comments series that you feel like you need to continue. Have you read any of these? Have you got Beyond Me? Did you enjoy them? So many questions. Let me know all of those answers in the comments below. You could just cherry pick one. But anything book related, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know how your reading's been lately, and everyone, as always, thank you for watching and stay safe.